Leanne.
And I'm Mary Ann.
And that's Mike.
This is Mike.
I'm Mike.
He's our president of the Historical Society, and he is going to talk to you today about what he likes about the Historical Society. Take it away, Mike.
All righty. So what I'm going to talk about today, and I promise you I'm going to try and make this reasonably brief. What I'm going to talk about today are the bits of Kewaunee history that I find most interesting. And for me, I can break that down and think about it with one phrase, sort of pioneer entrepreneurs and businesses. And the first one, and probably most important in Kewaunee's history, is Walworth. At least we know it by Walworth. It actually started in 1868 by Valerius Anderson. Now that's a name. And just think about that for a second. 1868 was just 3 years after the Civil War. I mean, Abraham Lincoln had just recently been shot, and Andrew Johnson was president of the country. So that was a long time ago that company started. And they started out, it was actually called the Anderson Steam Heating Company, Steam Heater Company. And they made apparatus, in fact they called it that, apparatus for heating animal feed. And that was important because at the time, farmers would have animals that would, a lot more than today, die of disease, particularly cholera infections. And so heating the feed sort of killed those germs, and it really helped reduce animal diseases a lot. It was very popular with the local farmers. A man named William Haxton came into his business, and in 1875, the company changed to be the Haxton Steam Heater Company, and Valerius Anderson exited the business. Mr. Haxton added additional products over the years, pipe, tubing, fittings, radiators, and boilers. Again, in ads, they called it heating apparatus. Kind of all the bits and pieces need to put together to create a heating system. And certainly for more than animal feed, it was for houses, industrial facilities, businesses, and the like. And he really grew the business. Haxton did. It grew. I think after his first 5 years, it was in order of magnitude 6 or 7 times larger than it was in 1875. So that's good. Now, in 1891, I think to reflect the varied nature of the business, they changed the name to Western Tube. And then a year later, something really earth-shattering happened in Kewaunee business. Western Tube split into 2 pieces. One piece remained Western Tube, and it was run by John Pierce. The other half became Kewaunee Boiler. And the largest shareholder and president was E.E., or his friends called him Double E. Baker. And so Kewaunee Boiler was born in 1892. Now back to Western Tube, a.k.a. Walworth, for a moment. The reason I say I think it's the most important business in Kewaunee's history and that they were pioneers is that it was by far the largest business that ever existed in Kewaunee. At its peak in 1906, it employed approximately 4,600 people in a town that was maybe 3 times that size, 4 times that size, if you include Wethersfield and the surrounding areas. So can you just imagine at that time, the high percentage of people, certainly of working age, that were employed by just Walworth or Western Tube at the time alone. So a big, important business in Kewaunee's past. Now, Kewaunee Boiler, although it never employed as many people as Walworth did, it was, I think you would say, Kewauney's most enduring business, lasting well over 100 years. Again, led by E. Baker. An interesting thing about Mr. Baker, in 1926, he had a little over 100 of these boxes made. They're called curiosity boxes. And I suspect at the time, a lot of people put little cigars or cigarettes or trinkets or knickknacks in them. But they were a memento for his friends, colleagues, some competitors, civic leaders. It was a memento honoring his 50 years in Kewaunee. And not only do we have a couple of the curiosity boxes that you could see in the museum, we have a scrapbook full of letters that he sent out with it, and the thank you notes that he got back from people who received it. Lots and lots of them. Very, very interesting to look at. So he was probably, I think, one of the most important businessmen in Kewaunee history. And not just for his work at Kewaunee Boiler. He helped establish the Kewaunee Park District. He helped funded it, and the trust that he set up is still with us and helping the Park District today. So that's Boiler Shop and Walworth. The next company I'd like to talk about in this in this theme of business pioneers in Kewaunee is the company that made this. And you'll be forgiven if you don't know what this is. The company was formed in 1912 as the Kewaunee Corn Hanger Company, and they made corn hangers. So you'd put a corn cob on here, hang up rows and rows of these in your barn so the corn could dry. Now the company added a lot of products over the years. They added a wide range of agricultural equipment. In fact, they were widely known for that. They added coal handling equipment, and they even added this as a product line, Kewaunee safes. Just in case you didn't know, we used to make safes in Kewaunee. These were used a lot in businesses like gas stations. The outlet is on the bottom. I'm not going to lift it, it's awfully heavy. Locked with a key. And they kind of said that, well, you know, the attendant doesn't have the key, and they would put money in here, and it would be like almost, this thing is built like a tank. There's a big groove in the back. They were frequently welded to steel posts, or sometimes they were even inset. There were different models than this that were embedded in the concrete. Lasted for several years in Kewaunee. Now, you didn't know that company by the name Kewaunee Corn Hanger. You probably knew them by their more recent name, which was Kewaunee Machinery and Conveyor. Just want to highlight a couple of more companies that I think of as pioneering businesses in Kewaunee. And this one was started in 1919 by Royal Hayward, former employee of the railroad. Because he didn't want to move with the railroad, he decided to start his own business. And he did that in 1919. And it became Kewaunee Manufacturing. Now, I know you probably know Kewaunee Manufacturing, which was out on Burlington Avenue, kind of the next door neighbor to Machinery and Conveyor. You probably knew them as a company that made metal doors and windows. And they certainly did that, and did that for a long time. But they actually started out making coal chutes. Now this is not a catalog from 1919, but it shows a wide variety of coal yard equipment, including, I don't know if you can see that well, but Kewaunee coal chutes and coal conveyors. Again, they were around for over 50 years as well. A great pioneering company in Kewanee. And then there's Boss. Everybody knows Boss Manufacturing. They were started in 1893, and their first, they made gloves. They sewed gloves from the very beginning. But one of the things that really helped make them a big company was their success in corn husking equipment. And we have examples here in the museum of a ton of this kind of corn husking hooks and pegs, they call them, but gloves, hooks, and pegs. Very interesting. Boss, although they've sold most of the businesses that we know, still exists today. Started in 1893. Now, I'd also say on our website, I did a video of the history of Boss Manufacturing a few years ago. If you want to learn more about Boss, that other than coming into the museum, that would be a good place to go. Now, there were certainly other pioneering companies in Kewanee that you may or may not have heard of, and I'm not going to go into them in any great detail, but there was Kewanee Water, which later became Kewanee Private Utilities when they added electrical power generating equipment. They started out basically making stuff to get running water in houses that were off-grid. Think farmhouses, businesses that weren't in town. And they expanded from water to electrical power generation, and they were very successful with that. I think probably one of the downfalls of their business was more and more companies became connected to the grid, and their addressable market declined. Now, there are a few other great entrepreneurs in town and businesses existed. One that I find fascinating, but it was absolutely a financial, certainly not successful. I think it lost money almost every year it was in business. And that was the streetcar system. It started in the early 1900s and ran through the mid-30s and really never made any money. It was a case of poor timing. They started their company. It was a great idea at the time, and then all of a sudden automobiles and buses and all that kind of stuff made life very, very difficult for them. But an interesting business that I find fascinating. And again, there's other companies in Kewanee that were important that weren't as big, like Demler's and Peters Pump. Really interesting industrial businesses from Kewanee's past. One last company I want to highlight. Up to this point, pretty much everything that I've talked about was started before 1920. But we had some great entrepreneurs in the 60s in Kewanee that started Sandy's, the fast food chain that I'm sure most of you fondly remember. I was a big fan of the Hilo. This is, I don't know what this really has to do with Sandy's. It's a cooler, promotional thing that I'm sure they handed out. I suppose it was so you could, get a bag of food at the restaurant, chuck it in here, and take it home before it got cold. I don't know. But Sandy's was again, another example of great entrepreneurs from Kewanee. Started here and headquartered here. So Kewanee has a rich history. I find the history of business and manufacturing particularly interesting for me. You might find something else interesting. We've got a ton of stuff on sports and schools and churches and clubs and the arts, military, breweries, you name it. We've got all kinds of stuff from Kewanee's past here at the museum, and I would invite you all to come on down and see it. I haven't talked to anybody, particularly on their first visit, that when they left, they didn't say, wow, I didn't know it was like this. So if you've not been here before, you owe it yourself to come and check it out. Our opening day for 2024 is see, that was the alarm to remind you that our opening day is May 2nd. It's a Thursday in a couple of weeks. May 2nd, 2024, we open at 1 o'clock, and I hope to see you there.